Okay, so we're so happy to have Sam Dunn with us today for this incredible presentation. And I just wanted to remind you that I'm going to drop into the chat information about where you can see our other upcoming Learn at Lunches that are going to be available for you, and also learn about the other cool things that KMHA is doing. So I'll drop that in the chat. Also, feel free as the presentation is going on to drop your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. There will also be an opportunity at the end of Sam's presentation to go over questions from you all. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Sam. Sam, take it away.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Shout out to my mom who is on this recording as well. Yeah, that's exciting. I'll share my screen real quick and we'll get going because there's a lot of information, but I hope that you guys will be as interested as I am. Can everybody see the screen? Okay, awesome. So the title of today's presentation, Shared Legacy Uncovering Eckstein Norton University. And the title of this presentation really it stems from the way that this topic first came to the attention of a wider audience and to my attention. Uh, as we will see, this school, ENU, Eckstein Norton, still has very much a living legacy, but it was to a certain extent rediscovered by a family historian, Jerry Terrell. And now it exists both as this historical narrative, but it's also a physical space, and it's currently owned by a family, Gary and Kathy Fields of Bullitt County. So many of us were very pleased when a historical marker was put up in 2024. Shout out to Jim Seaver and everyone at the Kentucky Historical Society. Uh, there he is, thumbs up. The Fields were at that dedication, and they had actually invited members of their family. So when I think about the story of Eckstein Norton and the legacy, it's important to so many people. It's important to Jerry, to the Fields family, to the Historical Society, to myself. It's important to all those who are interested in African American history. And I think it's important to all of us, really, who still live in the world that was created all those years ago. So we're still very much living in the world created by these individuals and by the policies that shaped their lives. We've got to start when we discuss industrial education, or really even just Black education in the late 1800s. You've got to start with Booker T. Washington. Um, Booker T. Washington was actually the man who popularized the industrial model. The industrial model, you might call it, essentially offers vocational training in the context of the period, which is post Reconstruction. This is like 1880s onward. It means that, in effect, white patrons would support Black education, but they would only support it to a point. They would educate the workforce, but that education did not always offer opportunities that would allow African Americans to challenge Jim Crow. And I've got a quote here from James D. Anderson. As he puts it, James D. Anderson is a popular or a well-known historian who studied Black education. As he puts it, it's an ideology designed to avoid confrontation, and it maintains within the South a social consensus that did not challenge traditional inequalities of wealth and power. So you're offering education to a point. And for some of the Black community, this is considered the only manageable option. It's either industrial education or nothing. Of course, if you're familiar with the time period, all of this rests on a bedrock of segregation and the threat of racial violence. And this is where Booker T. Washington kind of enters the story. He's born into slavery. He's got a very famous biography or autobiography memoir, Up from Slavery. But he's born into slavery. He's freed by Union soldiers, and then he ultimately attends what's called the Hampton Institute, which is one of the first industrial schools, and it's actually ran by a Union general. So all of this is actually coming from the North. You might think, oh, industrial education sounds like it could be a relic of the South, a relic of slavery, but these ideas actually come from the North, and then they're adopted by the South. So Booker T. Washington attends the Hampton Institute and he begins to learn about industrial education. The students at this school and at his school later on would have strict schedules, and they're often working physically demanding jobs. His famous school was the Tuskegee Institute, which was actually founded on that same blueprint. Has anyone heard of his famous speech, The Atlanta Compromise? You may be familiar. Maybe that may sound familiar from your old high school history class. But that actually kind of epitomized his approach, which was called the accommodationist approach. Like I said, a lot of people in the Black community at the time thought, well, we can't get everything that we want, so we'll take what we can get. We'll be accommodationist. And he really ran into a lot of pushback from a lot of others in the Black community. It was by no means like um, a set idea or a set strategy. So people like W.B. Du Bois, Black intellectuals, actually pushed back against Washington and people like him. So you've got this huge debate, and it's a debate that it's occurring on a national level, but it's also occurring in places like Kentucky. So it's not just Washington and Du Bois, it's happening right here at home, right here in Lexington and Louisville and Frankfort. A lot of this starts with the Kentucky legislature. And if there was any organization that might be considered the bad guy in this story, we try not to use those terms in history, but if there is a bad guy, it might be the Kentucky legislature because they're worried, just like Southerners and people across the nation, they're worried that educated African Americans might challenge the racial status quo. So they work really, really quickly to limit African American educational opportunities. Even as they tax African American communities, supposedly to fund education, quite often they would siphon those funds away from Black schools and send them to white schools. Because of the threat of racial violence, because of the institutionalized segregation, Black Kentuckians are just often told education's out of your reach. But African Americans, as always, they organized. One of the most prominent organizations in the state of Kentucky was the Kentucky General Association of Colored Baptists. And I would encourage you to remember the General Association of Colored Baptists because the support networks that they create, they're vital. They allow a means for Black Kentuckians to voice their aspirations and to organize and to make their voices and their needs felt. Because of this group and because of the organization that they facilitated, the Kentucky Normal and Theological Institute opens in 1879. So, because of this Association of Baptists, they're actually able to open a school. And when we say normal school, usually that means like a school to train teachers. But pictured here is kind of an outlier. So, if you look at the picture here, you'll notice that you've got both African Americans and white students. And this was actually a picture taken at Berea College. So Berea is our, kind of as I said, the outlier. It's the only integrated educational institution in the South. It's funded by abolitionists, and it actually resists segregation. So incredibly, Black and white students learned together here, but it's the only one in the South. And one institution, however admirable it is not enough to provide for the needs of the Black community. It actually would take leaders and it would take people with ambition and the know-how to take the Black educational aspirations to the next step to provide the schools that this community really needed. And it takes people like our guy here, William Simmons. Simmons is an incredible character. You may have heard of Simmons College in Louisville. He's actually the namesake of that school. So Simmons is born enslaved June 29th, 1849. He's born in Charleston, South Carolina. His parents actually self-emancipate. They escape slavery in Charleston and they escape to Philadelphia when he's young. So he actually grows up in Philadelphia in this kind of underground community of escaped slaves. And there was a large community in Philadelphia at that time. But it was very fraught. They would frequently be targeted, and riots were common at the time. So he pretty much started his educational career studying under his uncle, just with a private tutor essentially. But clearly he was very bright. In 1862, he apprenticed to a dentist in New Jersey. Then he tries to enter dental school, but he's turned away and denied because of his race. So he decides to join the Union Army. and you may be familiar, all of us Kentuckians, of course, have heard of Camp Nelson, which is very, hyper local to us, but that was a base for the United States Colored Infantry, which is the same branch of the service that Simmons joins. He joins the 41st United States Colored Infantry in 1864, and he fights at the Battle of Petersburg, and then he's actually present at Appomattox Courthouse when Lee surrenders. So he actually witnesses the Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrender to General Ulysses S. Grant, which is oftentimes kind of considered the end of the war. And I've thought a lot about Simmons and his story because that's just so incredible to me. Escapes from slavery, escapes up. His parents actually take him up to Philadelphia. He makes his way to New Jersey. He gets educated. He's denied entrance into dental school and joins the military. And he goes back south. And he's not going furtively. He's going back as a part of an army of liberation and of freedom, which is just an incredible, mind-blowing thing to me to think about him doing that. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like. I do want to highlight the sources, and I've kind of done this a few times in the presentation. Um, I'd like to introduce you to the Golden Jubilee of the General Association of Colored Baptists in Kentucky, and it's a 50-year history from 1865 to 1915. So a lot of the biographical information that I'm pulling up and that I'm talking about, especially for Simmons and Parrish, um, comes from that source. And it's really cool to be able for free. The New York Public Library has it digitized, and you can even order it on Amazon. So when we look back, and we'll talk about this more, but as we kind of go deeper and deeper into the story, we'll be able to reference the Golden Jubilee and use it to learn more and to get a better perspective and a deeper perspective on these guys. Simmons keeps going. After the war, he returns to his education. He gets a degree from Howard. He teaches school for a time in DC and Florida before he becomes ordained as a Baptist minister, and he moves to Lexington, Kentucky in 1879. He quickly makes a name for himself. He becomes a really prominent Baptist leader, and you'll see that religion is very much an undercurrent in the story. But very quickly, by 1880, he's appointed president of the Kentucky Normal and Theological Institute, which is later renamed the State Colored Baptist University or State University. So this is that school that was started by the Baptists that we discussed in the previous slide. Simmons becomes the president of this institution. And it's worth a moment here to talk about Simmons and his skill, his acknowledged administrative skill. When he first arrives at State, this school has only 2 educators, 13 students, and no resources at all. But he quickly turns that around. When you look at the sources at the time, at the records, very quickly he's doubling, he's tripling attendance, he's bringing in patrons, um, and the educator faculty grows as well. So it's really quite, I think, a testament to Simmons that he was able to take what was essentially at the time one of the only black schools, and when it was started, it was the first black school in the state, and it's underfunded and it's in need, and he uses his skills to turn it around. He gains a reputation as both an administrator and a leader. He becomes a really well-known writer and speaker. He receives a bunch of honorary degrees. His book, Men of Mark, which is actually what this sketch is from, um, it's considered now the authoritative work on Black Americans in the 19th century. So when we do historical research into prominent Black figures at that time period, a lot of that information is coming from Simmons, and he knew everybody. But like everything else, like the work that we do at Liberty Hall, like the work that we all do, it's all collaborative, right? He couldn't do all of this alone. He couldn't do any of this alone. It's a huge undertaking. The sheer scale of the undertaking and the scale of the need, it's pretty daunting. And the nature of Black political and social organization also almost demands that you collaborate. Black educational opportunities and Black educational improvement requires more than just one person, which is where we see Charles Parrish come in. Charles Parrish, you may be familiar with Parrish. His son was actually the first Black faculty member at the University of Louisville. But his father is an extremely distinguished man in his own right. He's also born into slavery. He lives the first few years of his life owned by a woman named Beverly Hicks. He meets Simmons when he starts to attend the Lexington Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky, where Simmons had just started preaching. Now, Parrish didn't have a great, educational career before he met Simmons. He actually dropped out of school and worked as a railway porter for several years. But he meets Simmons, and when Simmons moves to State University to become president, Charles Parrish goes with him, and he graduates in a couple of years as the valedictorian of his class. Only 3 degrees were awarded that year. But and I want to stress this, please don't mistake the low number of degrees as a poor reflection on the school or maybe make an assumption about the academic rigor of the institution, because we'll see another highlight from the sources here. It was extremely rigorous. As we see from the Courier Journal in Louisville, they said the valedictorian Charles H. Parrish selected the analysis of thought as his subject, treating it in a very scholarly manner, quoting it extensively from Locke, Darwin, Herbert Spencer, and other masters of thought. So it's an astonishing rise to me to go from a life as an enslaved boy owned by Beverly Hicks to the valedictorian of his school, quoting from some of the most famous intellectuals of the Enlightenment. And I mean, I've been to multiple college graduations and I've never heard anything like that. So it's pretty incredible. He stays at State University. He teaches Greek. He becomes involved with the Baptist Church, and he learns from Simmons. He kind of is his mentee. And we'll move on to the next slide. He also, like Simmons, becomes very involved in the Baptist Church. And it's also interesting to me as someone who wasn't quite familiar with the African American Baptist Church or the Association of Southern Baptists, how international they are. Later in life, Parrish actually travels. He travels to the Middle East. He preaches in Germany, in England. I mean, he is an international traveler, and he can supposedly preaches and converts hundreds and thousands of people across the world. Uh, to go from enslavement to that is just as incredible to me. Um, but in 1889, he's still relatively young, and he's working with Simmons at State University. But these two men notice that the needs of the community are still there. There's still a lack of Black educational opportunities. There's still hardly any African American teachers around the state. And they begin to think, well, we've done what we can here at State University. Maybe it's time for us to start a new school to continue to expand the opportunities in the state. And in their view, clearly, considering the time period, perhaps considering Booker T. Washington and considering the popularity of the industrial model, they thought that a true industrial school would better meet that need. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Clearly, you might even want to think that, or you could think that, white patrons would better support the industrial school. It would be easier for them to start it if it's an industrial school. There's always so many considerations, especially when you're navigating Jim Crow. Um, but there's a kind of cool point. I want to talk about this briefly. I love this. This is actually coming from Danville from the Kentucky Advocate, and it's the highlight from the source here. They're waiting for a legal document to be drawn up. And this is reported in the Danville newspaper, which is just so cool to me. And they say Professor Parrish requested to be furnished with a copy of Aeschylus, who is a Greek author, in the original with which he occupied himself while the bond was being written. It goes on to say that these two men are projected to be a great addition to the scholarly society in Danville. So say what you will about industrial education, about the accommodationist approach. These guys are intellectuals, very, very much so. And I think it's important. It's important not to lose sight of that. Also important not to lose sight of, and I can never really separate any of this in my mind. I can't separate the religion from the education, because at this point I've done so much research into it, and I like to think that I'm getting maybe closer than I was into seeing this as Parrish and Simmons would have seen it, because religion and education and the fight for equality, they were tied together intimately. There was no separating them. Washington, Booker T. Washington, he was a little bit more separated from it, but he wasn't quite as involved with the church as Simmons and Parrish. Um, when we look at the writings of Simmons and Parrish, we can see that they would use their religious networks, primarily the Baptist Church, they would use this network to gain community support, and they would build avenues and frameworks of resistance through the church. And it's so cool because you can see this speaking through a religious lens. Parrish is so much more critical of white supremacy than he ever would be speaking to a white patron or a white newspaper or even a black newspaper. This is essentially for the eyes of the churchgoers only. It's expected to be. This is a an internal document, and he is able to speak a lot more clearly here. And using religion, he can really allude to a lot of interesting stuff. And I'd like to read some here. As I said, he's speaking through a religious lens that few whites acknowledge or even question. Parrish wrote that human rights will be obtained even though the way lie through oppression. Where Christians live up to the gospel standard, race prejudice is unknown, Christianity is incompatible with caste. He also goes on to offer a veiled criticism of the industrial model. He writes, the only prize worth contending for in this world is men and all things else. All things else, all trade, all commerce, all industry, all government, all pleasures that do not contribute to the making of men, they must rest under his God's displeasure. Under Christianity, race prejudice is unknown. Christianity is incompatible with caste. The only prize worth contending for is men. Industry, trade, commerce, none of that matters. So I think that says it all. That says it all about their aspirations. These are not people that use the industrial approach. They don't accept it as a means of racial deference or subservience. These are men who are inspired by their faith. They know or they think that using the industrial model could ultimately subvert the segregation and the marginalization of African Americans. And to me, seeing the way that they talk and the way that they use religion to form and discuss resistance is just an indicator of their true beliefs and their true goals. But like everything else, someone's got to pay for it, right? Any of us who work with nonprofits or anything really, I mean, someone's got to pay for it. So this is where we start to see the introduction of Eckstein Norton. And Eckstein Norton, he's born in Kentucky. Um, he begins work as a clerk and then a business owner, and then he becomes involved with railroads. And he eventually is made president of the L&N Railroad. So Simmons and Parrish, while they're out here um, looking for funds for patrons, and the patron does a lot of things. The patron offers funds. It also offers protection and support. So if you've got a prominent white businessman with your name on the building, that offers quite a bit more support than and protection from white supremacy. So they go and they're looking around and they finally find Norton, and he's the president of the L&N Railroad. Uh, like Simmons, he has a talent for administration, and he's known for his ability to turn an organization around. He decides to support the school. The L&N Railroad decides to support the school, and they ultimately give up to $3,000. And there's a couple reasons why they might have done that. Um, Norton spent a lot of time in the North. He was from Kentucky, but he spent a lot of time in New York. And it's possible that he'd picked up some of that, philanthropic ideals up there. But I'm also aware that the L&N Railroad had many, many African American employees. So it's possible that they chose to support the school as a gesture meant to impress or placate the employees. Most of this is inference. It was never written down. Um, But like everything else, I would imagine it was a multi-layered decision. What we do know is that Norton himself gave 500, and the company donated 1,500, and the rest of the board donated even more. So I typed all this into an inflation calculator, and that 3,000 became 112,000 today, $112,000. I suspect that the buying power back then was probably even more substantial than 112 is today. It was a significant amount of money. And that name at the very bottom of the slide, Eckstein Norton University of Sciences, Professions, Arts, and Trades. That name is appealing to so many levels. You've got, of course, the name of your patron. You've got an appeal to the sciences, professions, the trades. Professions and trades, you're looking, that's a nod to the industrial nature of the school, but you're also discussing the arts. So, like everything else, it's a balancing act between appealing to the Black community and trying to secure the support of the white community. So they finally, with Norton's money, they finally find a place for the school. It's about 20, 30 miles south of Louisville in Bullitt County. Pictured here, you'll see that kind of brick building. That was originally owned by the Speed family, and they sold the property to Simmons and Parrish. The school opens its doors on October 5th, 1890. The inaugural class consists of 24 students taught by 16 African American instructors. It's an exclusively Black faculty and staff. As we will see, that sort of staffing model is not always guaranteed. But very, very quickly, the school faces tragedy. Simmons falls ill just a couple weeks after the school opens, and he passes away on October 30th. And remember, Simmons is the old mentor, the one with all the connections and the experience and the knowledge, right? He passes away. He's the founder, and he passes away, and the school faces its biggest challenge yet after only being open for 2 weeks. From the Louisville Courier Journal, we know during his funeral, Simmons was laid to rest under a canopy of green and in a massive bed of flowers. The casket was placed. The church was so crowded that standing room could not be found. And I know from another record that Parrish actually delivered a sermon. Despite his grief, so Parrish has now lost his mentor, his oldest friend, the man that got him into education, that literally took him under his wing from the very beginning and ushered him into his career. Parrish has now lost him, and the school is now his to lead. But pretty incredibly, Parrish decides to forge ahead, and he does succeed. Enrollment doubles, and then it doubles again. And in 1891, the school welcomes 97 students. I love this picture. I got to just say real quick, I love the pictures of the bands. So the first slide was a picture of the older brass band. This is a picture of the younger brass band, and the little guy with the French horn. He's so cute. The curriculum at Eckstein Norton is pretty interesting. It's actually, to me, there's so many aspects: the religion, the people, the little stories, but the curriculum is really cool. Um, as I said, I consider Parrish's work with Eckstein Norton to be a balancing act. It's a balancing act between black and white expectations of the industrial model, which is an expectation of subservience, and the black expectations of, giving their children a good education, the need to attract African Americans to the school. So one of the most important considerations of Parrish and his staff would be the building of trust at this point with white patrons and the white community around them. And with this trust, he's able to control the day to day. As I said, it's an all black faculty. Um, yes, they do teach the industrial model, and you can see on the slide I've got a long list, and this is only a portion of the list of the curriculum: dressmaking, sewing, cooking, printing, shoemaking, carpentry. Gender did play a role. So women lived separately, and women were often doing dressmaking and sewing, and the males would do carpentry and shoemaking and stuff like that. But because, as I said, Parrish has got a good reputation within the white community. And to a certain extent, there's trust there. So he's able to control the day to day. And within that sphere of influence, within his control, he's able to offer classes and experiences um, that may have surprised some of the white patrons. It becomes clear that there's a willingness to instruct students in the liberal arts, to actually award advanced degrees, to deviate from that industrial focus. One of the more interesting classes that I made sure to include it here is the cooking class. Ostensibly, it prepares students to become domestic servants, to work, you know, as a chef in a private home or to work for the Illinois Railroad as a cook. But in reality, the class teaches chemistry. It teaches the mechanics of food science and of nutrition. And all of this was really cutting edge stuff back in the day. I mean, this hasn't been studied. People, normal average Joes don't know about nutrition like we do now, but they're learning about it at Eckstein Norton. They're not just learning how to be domestic servants. They're learning real marketable skills that they can then disseminate into the Black community and that they can use they can use this as a basis for a career in science. There's nothing that says here that there's nothing to indicate that this was only to prepare domestic servants. And there's so many other examples that are similar to this. It's almost like, and I've said this before, it's almost like there's a facade of industrial education. They're telling people, and you see this in the newspapers, the white newspapers at least, it's all about the industrial education and what they're learning and how they're learning how to do, I don't know, carpentry or bricklaying, right? But when you look deep into the records and you look into the internal, just like the religious materials, the internal dialogue and the internal conversations happening within Exxon Norton and within the Black community, there are layers to this. And they are really, they're teaching stuff that I don't think anyone in the white community, at least the state legislature, would have been aware of. They probably wouldn't have approved, but Parrish is able to do it because his ultimate goal and Parrish and Simmons's ultimate goal, his mentor, was always the improvement of their community. Something that really does um, set Eckstein Norton apart from something like Hampton or Tuskegee would be their focus on the arts. Pictured here is Miss Hattie Gibbs. She's one of the first Black graduates of Oberlin College. Early in her career, she was here in Kentucky and she led the musical conservatory at Eckstein Norton. Members of the band played before presidents Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and a couple other like foreign dignitaries as well. And it's interesting to note, as I said, that neither Hampton nor Tuskegee offered musical training like this, formal musical training. Also at odds with the more stringent adherence of the industrial model, students also obtained journalism, editing, and printing experience. They published a in-house newspaper called the Eckstein News. Literary-minded students and faculty also organized student organizations like the Advanced Literary Society. And I think you can tell I'm interested in them. I'm excited about every small topic here. But these are so interesting too, because these are just like the General Association of the Colored Baptist. These places like the Advanced Literary Society, they provide opportunities for the sharing of ideas. It's a place to organize. It's a way to refute Jim Crow ideas about Black intellectual inferiority. For someone like W.B. Du Bois, he would recognize this as a space for Black intellectualism. And people like Miss Gibbs goes on to lead this incredible music school in Washington, D.C. And she's actually quite famous for her work outside of Eckstein. Eckstein was just the beginning for her. And as we'll see with the graduates on our next slide, this is really only just the very beginning for many, many people. So when you look at the hard work that Simmons and Parrish did with starting the school, you can actually kind of trace the roots and the legacy throughout the nation and throughout our nation's history. So we've got our students learning about the arts, and we've got them doing some industrial education, but many of them were also just in school learning, as we would today, liberal arts educations. And here we have Parrish, as always, kind of walking a tightrope, right in the middle, trying to hold it together, trying to balance expectations. Before we talk about the end of the school, though, I think it's worth it to look at the graduates. And this, to me, is the most telling statistic of them all. 61% of the degrees and certificates awarded came not from the industrial schools, but from the normal, which is the teaching college, and the actual college departments. So, despite this often being referred to as an industrial school, over half of the students left with non industrial degrees. Very quietly, with relatively little fanfare, Simmons and Parrish trained over 1,000 Black teachers, which is pretty incredible. Their ultimate goal, the goal of their careers, and to a certain aspect, their religious careers as well, was educational equality, providing Black communities with educational opportunities. And they trained over 1,000 teachers to go out into their community. It's worth it to look at a couple of graduates. There actually, for anyone who wants to do more research, maybe that's my job. It would be interesting to dive into every one of the graduates, but I have a couple here that are really cool. P.T. Frazier, he works as a college professor before becoming president of the Hopkinsville, Kentucky Male and Female College. So he's a direct descendant of Simmons and Parrish, doing exactly what they did, you know, working to better education in the state. And a couple of really interesting people that I had to put on this list. Elizabeth B. Cook, and she's got a wonderful, get on her Wikipedia and you'll be really impressed with what she did. She becomes a well-respected activist with the National Association of Colored Women, the Kentucky Negro Educational Association, and the NAACP. So we've got Simmons and Parrish, both born enslaved, turned educators, who then train people like Miss Cook, who are the literal vanguard of the civil rights movement. It's a direct line from Simmons and Parrish to the NAACP. The individual pictured here, our last graduate, is Thomas M. Durham, and he starts his career at Eckstein Norton, and then he graduates from Veterinary College, March 30th, 1899. He's the second African American in the nation to earn a PhD in veterinary science. Only the second ever. The first from Kentucky. Yeah. I see Jessica going, wow. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's incredible. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. You can continue to trace them back. But unfortunately, it did come to an end. And it all starts with the Day Law, the passage of the Day Law in 1904. It closes Berea. Berea was that Berea College, that integrated school that we discussed at the very beginning of the presentation. What happens? Day is a member of the Kentucky State Legislature. He is getting on a train and he sees two girls, one of whom is Black, one of whom is white passing, and they're on the way to Berea. And Day sees what he thinks is this interracial group of students, and he is so distraught and enraged that he introduces the Day Law, which specifically targets private institutions, saying that, every institution, whether it's public or private, must be segregated. You can no longer have integrated schooling. And it passes in 1904, and Berea, which was the last holdout of integrated schooling, is forced to segregate. Very quickly, the Black community, of course, pushes back. But there's something that they can do. Ultimately, they're forced to go along with the segregation and the Day Law. So they begin to formulate an idea to build another school that would kind of pick up the slack that Berea had once had. So they're filling in for Berea, and they form what's called the Lincoln Institute. Booker T. Washington actually comes up and supports it in person. The Lincoln Institute is very similar to Eckstein Norton. It's actually only about 40 miles from Eckstein Norton. So it's competing for resources for faculty and for students. So the Lincoln Institute opens. And within just a couple of years, in 1909, people start talking about closing Eckstein Norton or maybe merging the school. Parrish, of course, has committed 20 years of his life to this school. He tries to keep it open. He makes it about 3 years. And in 1912, Eckstein Norton and the Lincoln Institute ultimately merge. Um, I've got a little highlight from the sources there. A 1916 United States Bureau of Education report states that 8 of the 15 teachers at the Lincoln Institute were white, compared to the full complement of African American educators at Eckstein Norton. We know that after the school closes, some of the students go on to the Lincoln Institute. Um, we know that not many of the faculty did. So it's unknown, at least it hasn't been figured out yet. I haven't researched it, what exactly happens to most of the faculty and students. And it's entirely possible that there's no way to figure it out. Um, Simmons goes on, though, excuse me, Parrish goes on, um, and actually teaches at State University again, serves as its president, serves on the board of the Lincoln Institute, and travels extensively, as I said, to the Holy Land, um, and all across Europe. So he's got still got a lot left to do, and he makes a huge difference. I think, as sad as it is to think about the Lincoln Institute merging with Eckstein Norton, they had 22 years. They taught over 1,000 students, um, in a land that's segregated, that's in a land that's segregated by Jim Crow, and in a world that's always threatened by racial violence. The fact that they did what they did is absolutely incredible. I think it's pretty inspirational. But it is pretty inspirational too that this story has continued to grow and has continued to find a wider audience. Um, as I said, it was discovered initially by Jerry, and he's a descendant of Eckstein Norton actually, and he figures out, oh, we have this cool family connection to the school, or to this old school that no one even really knew about anymore. And he reaches out to professors at the University of Louisville. He's aware of the school, but he's wondering if anyone knows anything or can do some more research. And then one of my advisors, I was lucky enough, one of my advisors reached out to me and said, Sam, I know you're interested in this time period. Would you like to research the school? And of course, I said yes. I was happy to jump at the chance. And we've had some pretty good wins since then. We've published an article. The only prize worth contending for was published in the Ohio Valley History Journal in 2024. You'll notice the only prize worth contending for was actually that quote from Parrish talking about the only prize worth contending for is man. All the trades, all the commerce, all the industry, nothing matters, just man. Um, that's where that's drawn from. We also had a historical marker put up in that same year, and that dedication was incredible. You'll see in the slide there's a picture of some news coverage. There were several news cameras there, and it was covered pretty extensively. But we get there, and the families there. Kathy Fields is there, who owns the land now, um, and I'm there. Patrick Lewis from the Filson is there. All these news cameras, people from the Lincoln Institute, which is still going on, still going strong. A lot of local politicians, and several of us get up and speak, and we do our spiel, and then an individual from a local church stands up, and he starts to sing spirituals, and he walks into the field next to this tent, next to the remains of the school. The foundation of the school is still there. He walks into the field with his arms spread wide, and he's singing, and it was beautiful. And I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. And yeah, I mean, people were crying. It was an emotional moment, and it was to me the ultimate indicator that this sort of history and this story of Eckstein Norton and of Simmons and Parrish, that yeah, it's still very much alive. Yeah, and the work that they did, we're still living in the impact of it right now. Yeah. Additional records. This is pretty fun, actually. Additional records have been found recently. I went to a Baptist seminary, boys' college in Louisville, and found some records that were kind of tucked in the back of some other records. And this was only a couple months ago, and I saw this incredible page. This is from April 26th, 1912, and it's a handout from Simmons Memorial Day. So this was the last year that the school was in existence, probably the last Simmons Memorial Day that they ever did at Eckstein Norton. And you can see the sketch of him there. You'll see on the left C.H. Parrish, president. It kind of gives us a list of the faculty there. And if you kind of go farther down, you'll see that they had a song, Our Own Eckstein. So they had a school song. Little pieces like this really just made me want to go down a rabbit hole. I want to hear the song. I want to do some further research. There's clearly a lot more to do here, and over the course of my time looking into all this, I realized that there's not really much information out there about industrial education in Kentucky. There's a little bit about Eckstein Norton. It's a lot more Google searchable now. Now, if you search Eckstein Norton, a lot more stuff will come up just because of the work that we've done recently. But a lot of work has been done by genealogists and families and interested people, and it's my hope that we can combine some of my efforts and the efforts of those individuals and the efforts of places like Kentucky Historical Society and the Filson. We can all work together to reach a larger audience because it's such a cool story, and there's so many other questions that are, as of right now, unanswered. But thank you so much.
Sam, thank you. This was so great. I really appreciate it. Um, we've got time for questions if anybody has them. So I'll open this up to the group if anybody wants to ask some questions.
Jim Seaver says he can still remember the marker dedication and the musical performance.
It was great. It was a very moving event, and you and Jerry and our local hosts were all delightful to work with. So, just to brag on Sam very quickly, we used the application that he compiled for this topic as an anonymized exemplar that we share with people who are applying to the state marker program today. And we're like, make yours look like this, because it's such high quality research and very well compiled. It's a lean, mean application. So praise where praise is due. Thanks, Sam. I do have a quick question. I was thinking about the source base that you used for this research on this topic, and so often you're working with newspapers that were designed for predominantly white audiences of that era, and often see, the coverage is through that lens. So, can you talk a little bit about the challenges of working with those sources and maybe some of the ways that you were able to get around it? I can only imagine that finding copies of the Eckstein News was exceedingly difficult.
I want to give a shout out to the Bullitt County Historical Museum, the History Museum in Bullitt County. They've got a pretty incredible collection. None of it's digitized, so you got to go sit down there in the History Museum between the hours of like 9 to 4 on a weekday. But it's worth it if you take off. Reading, it's an interesting question because so much of it, when it comes to like the white perspective of the news, they would even sometimes report about things, but it's there's almost a willful ignorance within that reporting because everything is couched within their own ideas of what Black individuals can and cannot do. So when you look at something like the Literary Society, that may be mentioned in just an offhand remark, um, even in a white newspaper, but the whole idea or the appreciation of Black intellectualism isn't quite there like it would be when you look at their own records. So a lot of times with a white source, I'm reading between the lines, and maybe I'll get a small hint. You'll get a small hint or a small mention, and they don't think it's that important. But then you'll go into the records, maybe at the History Museum, and you'll find something else. Or I found at Boys College, I found these incredible minutes from the faculty meetings uh, just recently, which has been a treasure trove. And that's kind of opened up a lot more avenues and ideas for me just on ways to dive into it. I think what's so, last thing I'll say, because I could talk about this for a while, it's just from a white perspective, I think they don't expect anything except for subservience. they're expecting like Simmons and Parrish to kind of go along with whatever they say, a lot of ways. And so when you've like Parrish has done, when you've developed this trusted relationship, he can work behind the scenes in a way that I think a lot of people never even knew, never even suspected. No, is there an audio recording of the original children's class band? I wish. I haven't found one. It's entirely possible because this stuff is just kind of tucked away places. So it's maybe we can find one day. Simmons University Connect. So, hey Jerry, I didn't know you were on here. So Simmons. So after the Eckstein Norton closes, um, Parrish goes back to what was the state university, which had originally been that first university, which had been the Normal and Theological Institute. So he goes back to State University, and then it's renamed later Simmons College or Simmons University.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm from Hopkinsville, and you have blown
Hey,
my mind today because I knew none of these things. And as the presentation was going on, I was like, "This sounds so much like M&F College here," which makes a lot of
yeah,
sense now.
yeah,
And Hoptown also has connections to the Nortons, so thank you
yeah.
for that. And you've inspired me to dig into what was male and female college that we call
Mhm.
MNF. MNF still exists in a different capacity today, so they're still here as it's called the College of the Bible, and it's a Black Baptist upper level training. And so now I want to go dig into their records real bad.
You should. That's so cool. That makes total sense, right, with what we've talked about with the Baptist connection. Wow, that's cool. That makes me so happy that to hear you say that.
Come down and see us sometime.
I will. Yeah, my parents live pretty close over there. Maybe I should stop by on the way home.
Please do.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Hudson. I actually work at the Folsom Historical Society.
Hey,
I heard about the marker dedication, but I think I just started. So I do remember Patrick going down there um to the ceremony. So my question is, you said talking about doing a deep dive slash rabbit hole. Um, is there like, do you have any plans on doing any more any more like, I mean, obviously did the marker, but are there's any other type of projects that you would like to do with this research?
yes, you're hitting me close to home there because I've been in talks with a couple different organizations, hopefully to put a book together, which would be the ultimate goal because this all started initially as my thesis at the University of Louisville. Um, I think it ran to like 160 pages. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole when I did that. But I've uncovered even more since then because I just keep returning. It's so interesting to me. I keep returning to the topic. Every 6 months, I'll kind of set aside some time and I'll go somewhere and research and then kind of work on it and think about it all the time. So ultimately, I'd like to put a book together, and I think maybe it may cover a larger a larger scope of work than just Eckstein Norton, maybe a larger look at the lives of Simmons and Parrish, or a larger look at industrial education in the state. Um,
So yeah, my current title is the African American History Program Manager, but now it's going to be changed to the Curator of the Black Experience. Um, but you know, Jessica know how to reach me. I definitely would like to collaborate in some form, or at least be some type of, any type of help that I can in regards to, research or whatnot. So yeah, definitely, look me up. Definitely would love to collaborate with you in some capacity.
that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to. Even if the book doesn't work out, that's kind of up in the air right now. I think the state of the publishing industry is just crazy.
Uh-huh.
Um, but even if that doesn't work out, I'd love to just, I'll give this presentation in person.
That would be
I'd be
lovely.
happy to
Yeah,
do
we can
that.
definitely
Yeah.
collaborate in some way or whatnot. But yeah, Jessica has my contact information. So yeah, definitely reach out. We can maybe at least first chat, and then maybe we can figure out how we
Yeah,
can collaborate in some way.
that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, I really look forward to that. So Jessica's no longer at Liberty Hall, but I'm sure I can find her information at online or something. Definitely.
Jessica Whitehead, actually, she works. We
Oh,
work
Jessica
together.
Whitehead. Okay, perfect. There's a lot of Jessicas.
Not
Yeah.
not
There's so
not
many
Jesse, not
Jessicas.
Jesse at now who's at
Thank you,
Buckingham Acres
90s.
Grove. No, no,
Yeah.
no. Jessica Whitehead.
Yeah, thank you,
We
90s.
work we,
Yeah.
we
Thank you,
both work at the
90s.
Folsom. I know how to find her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will send an email after this is done to connect you guys up.
Cool.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. Um, do we have other questions before we wrap up?
J name babies. Yeah.
I'm cracking up.
I This is Jerry Tyrrell. I just want to do a shout out to Sam for his incredible work, and his spirit has just been such a blessing, and our family has just so appreciated everything that he's done. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. It all started with you guys. That's the incredible thing about this story. It's a great case study for how, just like a family historian, genealogy researcher, that can open so many doors and can really just continue to grow and expand. Now we're sitting here talking about doing something with the Filson and maybe doing a presentation or something. So, I mean, it could continue to grow in ways that we'll never know. And it all started with you. So thank you, really.
All right, you all. Well, this has been such an amazing presentation. Thank you, Sam, and thank you for all of you for your insightful comments and questions. This has been recorded, so this will be available on our KMHA website and on our YouTube channel if you want to revisit it for any of the wealth of information or sources that Sam highlighted. But thank you again for joining us for Learn at Lunch. And if you have questions that you would like to get to Sam, feel free to reach out to us at kentuckymuseums@gmail.com and we can get you hooked up with Sam. So again, thank you so much for an incredible presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. This was awesome. Really fun.